So, as some of you may know, I was not a fan of the TOS episode The Deadly Years, where Kirk, Bones, and other crew members become really old. And this episode had something similar, so it was a Are you alright?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Crew destroys a vessel infested with a mysterious disease.
They died of old age.
Dr. Pulaski risks her life to find a cure.
Doctor, I want you back aboard this ship.
Now, she's old before her time, and her time is running out. On Star Trek, The Next Generation.
Unnatural Selection. Would you consider this the first Pulaski episode?
Yes, I would. And it's weird because she's a recurring guest star, not a regular, not, you know what I mean? So an entire episode directed around here is kind of strange. And the way it's kind of starts off, with Picard and Troy, like, talking about her, like, oh, what do you think? Do you think, almost talking about it as if they're going to fire her?
Is it possible that such consuming dedication could interfere with her judgment?
I feel your concern, Captain, but I don't share it.
Which I think is kind of strange, but I think that's a bait and switch because instead of possibly being fired, it's that she might possibly die. And I think it did the Deadly Years 10 times better in terms of getting old super fast.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, for anyone that's not a TOS fan, the Deadly Years was my least favorite episode of that whole series, and the reason was because just doing old age makeup isn't enough. Like, I don't want to go into a whole rant about the episode again, yet again, but there wasn't enough meat on the bone beyond that to enjoy, and I thought there was here. I thought that was the biggest difference. The old age makeup, first of all, it looks better, but let's put aside the comparisons. It was just a compliment to the story of the episode that it didn't even really get in the way. Like, it was just a neat compliment to, oh, we see Pulaski really old, and we see some of these other characters aging as the episode goes on. That's really the only part that played. The disease making you old didn't play into the plot other than you're gonna die because of it. Like, it wasn't, oh, they can no longer, Pulaski can't do her doctor job anymore because she's old. Like, it did not play into it in that way. I'll take it a step further. You said the beginning was a bait and switch because of that. I thought it was one of those things where, for me, it annoys me when something at first kind of seems normal, like you shouldn't like question it that much, but then in retrospect, you're like, oh, well, that's only written into this episode because of the plot of the episode. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, Picard had no reason that was set up for him to question Troy about Pulaski. Now, I know everyone loves to headcanon and argue reasons for why things happen in the show and there's not a written reason, so I'm sure people will say, oh, well, he probably asks Troy about all his employees all the time, and, it just showed the Pulaski one here because it's relevant. And if you want to forgive the show in that way, that's totally fine. I'm a harsher viewer than that, and if you're going to put in a scene like that, to me, I'm going to call it out as to like, oh, there's no reason this is happening now. It's because of the episode plot that's about to happen.
Yeah, of course, these conversations probably happen all the time. The cameras can't be rolling on every second of their job, obviously. But so the stuff they show us has to make sense totally. It can't just be there for the sake of, oh, that's why they showed that.
Yeah, because, as pro wrestling fans, I feel like one of the biggest things for me when I'm watching media is suspension of disbelief. Like, the best thing a show or movie or whatever can do is to make me forget that I'm watching a show or movie or something that's fictional. Like, just the same thing with pro wrestling, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's fake when you're watching it, but if the match is so good or the story's so good that you get sucked in regardless, that's when it's great. So, because of that, when I'm watching the show and stuff pulls me out of it from, like, the writing sense or, like, things that don't quite add up as to why did that happen unless it's because of the events of the episode, I think I'm more harsh on that than the average viewer, and that's why. When I don't have any of those types of thoughts in an episode, that's when I know it's great. Like, I don't even question any of the, like, writing or logic or anything like that.
What is the nature of your emergency?
Can't hold out anymore.
Yeah, not the best hook. I think a distress call is happens quite often.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't think that's enough of a hook, but small complaint there.
They find the Lantry first, and that was their distress call, and they're all old and dead, and Picard knew them, and I think maybe even Riker and some other people knew of the people on the Lantry, and they were like, why are they so old?
It's like they had a battle with time and lost.
This episode is super quiet, lack of score, and also lack of a B story, really. Like, I'm thinking of Worf, Data, anyone else, for the most part, all they like the Geordie like our not B team, but our lower level subordinate
Supporting cast, yeah.
supporting cast does nothing for this episode. It's weird. I mean, we've been praising like Brent Spiner for the previous two we watched. Like he did nothing here.
So then after finding out about the land tree, they also come across a planet of people who are experimenting genetically with children.
Our research here is limited to human genetics. I can assure you we're not dealing with something that got away from us.
And I'll fully admit right now, in terms of like the medical science, why this old age thing is happening, I didn't really care. So I didn't really soak in like the actual information of why it is. I know it had to do with the DNA and like that's why Data wasn't affected and all that. But at the end of the day, I didn't like care enough to really get into the meaty details. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They mentioned about this flu, and then they mentioned that this group of kids that they have that's aging, they have these super strong antibodies that can attack these viruses like straight on, like even before like it gets close to them. So you kind of like knew, like okay, that's why they're getting old super fast. But one thing I do like about this episode, it might be like slow, boring, flat, but I just love, especially when we don't know, just everyone sitting around the table trying to figure out what it is. That involves everyone, even Worf, security officer. Just like I just love hearing everyone's point of view and trying to figure it out, and also feeling like we're sitting at the table, like, oh yeah, it's a good point. Oh, it could be this. I mean, that's always fun. But when you know what it is, it's like. But at that point, we didn't know, so that's always fun for me.
Yeah, and one of the many benefits of having such a strong supporting cast is when they do those scenes, you're genuinely looking forward to hearing everyone's perspective and what they want to do about it as well.
Mhm.
And Picard is a great captain when it comes to listening to everybody. He's like, okay, Dr. Pulaski, what do you think? Riker, what do you think? Worf, what do you think? And in a lot of shows, that could be boring, but it's not in The Next Generation because we are bought into all of these characters. So they're not all going to get a ton of screen time, so we're excited for them to be able to have their part in these scenes.
Yeah, and you know who takes full advantage of his screen time? Colm Meaney.
Well, as you know, the transporter keeps a record of all transmissions, a pattern, if you will. Usually it's just stored for security purposes.
Miles O'Brien, my guy. Talk about just like a working actor, just coming in, doing his job. And we'll get into it later, but doesn't need any cue cards or anything. Just remembers all his crazy words. I just had to give a shout out to good old Colm there.
Yeah, and I don't think you're alone. The videos for season 2 have started going up now on YouTube, and we've gotten a lot of comments of people hyping up Chief O'Brien as well. So hopefully he sticks around. I don't know how much he's in the show or how long he's there, but yeah, you kind of hinted at it. Let's talk about the cue card thing. This is the first time in any of the Star Trek properties that I've noticed clearly Diana Muldaur, Dr. Pulaski, is reading a cue card in the scene where her and Deanna are walking down the hallway. She's clearly just looking off screen the whole time. Now, I'm not a big watcher of like SNL or, live shows or anything, but I can tell when someone's reading a cue card. And maybe it's happened in the past and I haven't noticed it, but it was very obvious in this episode several times, most of the time with Pulaski. But here, Deanna did it too.
Yeah.
Where like Pulaski eventually turned around and then Deanna was looking off screen. So it made me think, like, I know the TV schedule, as you always say. So it's like, do you think there was rewrites and they were like, okay, we just got to write this shit right now, or we need an extra scene for exposition. We're writing this here, read this. I could totally buy that, but it's weird that it hasn't happened before this that I've noticed, and I'm hoping that it doesn't actually happen all the time, and this was like the glass-breaking realization for me to where I'll never be able to, not notice it. So they do make contact with this colony who have been genetically engineering these children, and while they're all infected, the children are not and have been in quarantine since this started. After they all discuss on the Enterprise, they agree to beam up one child wrapped in styrolite to quarantine it from everybody on the Enterprise. And when they do this, it's supposed to be, I believe they say like a 12 or 13-year-old child.
Like 12-year-old, yeah.
And it looks like an adult,
Yeah,
like
it's
a
a
young
full-grown
man.
man, yeah.
And it's part of their genetic engineering.
A trick! Transporter reverse! A moment, Lieutenant.
And you find out that all of these kids have like abilities like telekinesis. The one that they beam up is telepathic. So they all have like these, it's supposed to be evolution of humans. We can talk about that thematically later. But I really liked the styrolite. It was a really cool practical effect because I would be like, like if I was the actor.
Yeah, like if I was claustrophobic. Yeah, I mean, clearly it's just like a plastic case that they just
Mhm.
put over him. But visually, it looks really great. But I would not want to be that actor.
So after some discussion and kind of a back and forth argument with Picard, he finally agrees to let Dr. Pulaski go down to this planet, almost as like I don't want to say a sacrifice, but almost as a risk of a certain kind. Her and Data, because they believe Data won't be affected, which they end up being correct. And it turns out that the children, while they aren't affected by the disease because of their genetic engineering, they still carry it and can spread it. So Dr. Pulaski ends up getting the disease from this kid.
One, I totally believe Pulaski was going to die. Two, because of Tasha Yar, obviously, and just a constant, just guest star Diana Muldaur. So I thought like she can die at any time, and having the balls. I mean, we knew why, but like the balls to kill off a main cast member, it's like anything can happen in the World Wrestling Federation. But also, I think Pulaski's starting to grow on me a little bit because I don't know, she's very reminiscent of Bones in terms of humanity.
You have a responsibility to this ship,
I
which
also
goes.
have a responsibility to humanity.
Being a good person and doing the
Yeah.
right thing, you know what I mean? And a little bit of that was coming out, like, oh, I'll risk, this to sacrifice to save these people. So it's like, and then her and like Picard like arguing over regulations and stuff, like, kind of took me back to Kirk and Bones a little different.
When you're basically making a carbon copy of a character, you would hope that some of the positive traits carry over, which I think they did in this
Yeah.
episode. I still wish that it wasn't so obvious to the point where it's like it's Bones, basically.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't want to say it's not because she doesn't have like they're just not the same in their performances really. But yeah, I'm actually surprised you said that. That's interesting. I've never been a hater of her thus far. I think she's just fine. Like she's no Dr. Crusher, but she's fine. I feel pretty indifferent about her even after this episode.
Yeah, maybe because she did spend some time with Data and didn't, destroy him.
I hate to keep reminding you, but you are a machine. You'll be perfectly safe.
But I was referring to you.
Or bust his balls, really. It was more like, this is the guy I'm working with. Because, as soon as I saw those two together, I'm like, and then, like, the possibility she might die, so I'm like, oh, this is going to be her. She's going to have, like, her swan song, nice final touching moment with Data and then be gone. But no, she's still alive. And they didn't really have a nice moment, so maybe it'll come.
It's really Chief O'Brien that saves the day.
We might try the trace.
The transporter trace.
They were able to figure out, like, Pulaski's last time she was beamed and was able to use that data. So hopefully when they beam her back, it's whatever.
Yeah, they get a hair follicle from her brush.
Yeah.
And they use that to get her uninfected DNA to match it up, and they call it a trace with the infected DNA so that they can basically, whatever is different about the DNA, filter that out. I found that actually very unique and interesting, and I'm glad that for the solution being the transporter, it wasn't like so vague that you couldn't even like give any logic to it. Like they give a pretty logical explanation for something that's clearly like sci-fi and like it's clearly not a real thing, but it's like it's nice that they went out of their way to explain this is why it would work, this is why it makes sense, and they even say in the show this is very risky, we don't even know if this is going to work.
This modification's one way only. If it doesn't work, we won't be able to reverse transport the doctor back to the planet.
That's obviously to build suspense as well. But yeah, I wouldn't say I went as far as you in believing that she was going to die necessarily. Because like, wow, we talk about Tasha, dying in that first season. Like this character, I mean, it's been like, it was 7 episodes. I'd have been really shocked. But I mean, again, who knows what her contract was or what the situation was. But so it was believable. What do you think about the actual old age makeup of her as well as Dr. Sarah?
Final form old Pulaski looked great. But like the halfway point where like it was just like this weird like clearly gray makeup, like that looked really bad. When Pulaski first started to get old and just like that gray makeup, I'm like, oh, this looks awful. But once it was like full on, like, yeah, she's super old, I think it looked fine.
Yeah, I agree.
If she's going to be consigned to oblivion, then.
Thank you, sir.
So Colm steps back, and then like Picard's having some trouble, but who steps in to save the day? Like, Captain, wait, and then he does something.
It's not working.
Captain, wait.
And he's able to do it. Pulaski comes in, and I think she goes straight to Picard and thanks him. And then Colm's not like, oh, it was me. I wrote a letter. No, he just did his job. Doesn't need the credit. he's got my credit, and that's what matters.
Yeah, great character, and also awesome that it's a team effort. You have someone who hasn't even been like a major part of the main crew that we've seen thus far get to play such a big role in this. I mean, he had more lines than Jordy in this episode because he's not just part of the engineer. Like I had thought of him before as like, oh, just another engineer guy that is under Jordy. He is in a way in that department, but he's the transporter guy. So for this being a transporter solution, it made sense for it to be him. And yeah, I really liked that.
Yeah, a recurring small character like that playing such a huge part in this episode, like awesome. You know what I mean? Like I think we used to like bust balls on like TOS, like how many like rotating people, and like maybe one to be featured per episode, but then never seen again. So, and if like Colm goes back to just being a guy in the background for a bit and brought back up every now and then, I think that makes it so much more real.
Yeah, 100%. And then let's talk about the ending.
Lieutenant Worf, arm the photon torpedoes.
It's a small touch, but I really like it. They go back to the Langtree and they blow it up, but they're doing it as the kind of way to honor them. They don't want to just leave their dead bodies out in space. So they blow up the ship while they're all kind of standing there, kind of like paying their respects. And I really like that. It's like not necessarily like a super sad ending. I mean, it is a sad ending, but it just hammers home that reality of like, this is Starfleet. It's not all, as we know, it's not all rainbows and amazing. It's like you could die at any moment. And you could almost see the look on Picard right before he says engage, where he like reluctantly says engage, because it's like that reminder, like this could be the Enterprise in any given situation. We know it won't be, but they could be this crew. So I really liked the ending.
Yeah, no matter how small a ship, I don't, the Lantry wasn't on like Enterprise. I think it was just a cargo ship, right? But still, like everyone on the ship gave their respects, and yeah, you nailed it right on the head. I don't know if I can add much more to that. Just that's what you would do, and it's like, but you got to go back to work. But I do love that little bit, like, oh, it sucks out here, but engage.
So it sounds a little bit more like you like this episode than I think when we first watched it. Is that fair?
Yeah, on a first rewatch, just because of how like slow and drawn out it was, I'm like, okay, but like rethinking it over, let it sit with me. We usually like talk and discuss on the same day, but kayfabe, we're doing it on 2 separate days, so letting it sit with me for a bit and like kind of like going through the whole thing again. I'm like, oh, I think I kind of like this one, but is it gonna make a list? I don't know, probably not.
Yeah, I said at the end of our reaction that I was like kind of unclear on how I felt about it. Like I was like, I liked a lot about this, but for some reason, it just like didn't like hit that like super high level. And I still basically feel the same way, but I think that it's more of like this show seems to have these episodes so far where that episode in particular might not be like your favorite when it comes to like episodic nature of the show. This particular episode doesn't stand out as like one of my favorites, right? But this show seems to have a bunch of episodes where it just sets the tone and it helps out the series as a whole. Like the moments in this show, like Dr. Pulaski, being willing to give her life for this situation and these people, those conference room scenes, the ending, most definitely, it sets the tone that kind of helps other episodes because it's like you can't fit all of these things in every episode, right? So instead of fitting them in all of those, we put them in this episode that like the story isn't that great, but you remember all these moments. So then when they come across, dead crew in a future episode, we'll be reminded of this and like how serious they take it and things like that. Or when Pulaski gets into another situation, we'll be reminded of this. So that's why I like the episode, I think. And I also think TNG has just done a really good job of that, which is why, regardless of what you think of the first 2 seasons, I think for a first-time watcher, it's extremely important to watch because, I mean, we'll see once we get there, but even if season 3 and beyond is exponentially better, having the setup of all of these characters and the tone has been, I think, like something you just should not skip. So
Yeah, if we went straight to season 3, like none of those like episodes would have as much weight if we did watch them. Did I say that right?
yeah,
Okay, because as some of like bad as some of these episodes are, like each one, we've mentioned this before, each one has important little building blocks of scenes and like character development that I know are just going to enrich season 3 and on more. But like if we didn't watch those, like some scenes wouldn't land or like some relationships wouldn't land, especially since we know sometimes things are like connected. And like I can only imagine that maybe there's some things in season 3 and on that, might reference something from seasons 1 and 2. And like, can you imagine just not watching 2 seasons? Like, people are like, oh, just go to season 3. It's like, are you crazy?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's
And I just also think one of the big things that episodic TV still has over movies, but even has over like TV shows today that are 6 to 10 episodes. What those are all really missing out on is just time spent with the characters. Like,
yes.
regardless of the quality of the episodes, you're going to become more connected to characters just with time. Like when you're watching a 90-minute movie, 2-hour movie, whatever, you just don't have as much time to invest. So movies have, they offer different stuff. But like in episodic TV, we will have spent after the second season, 40 something episodes with these characters. Hopefully that, they all stick around and we don't have other people booted off or killed or whatever. But we've spent all of this time. So even going into season 3, throw away the quality of the episodes aside, like, you have all of those hours just spending with these fake people. You know what I mean? So it's easier to like care about them.
Engage.
But we don't gotta go into a whole rant about it. Let's talk about our patron takes. All right, this one's from Cat with Attitude. Judging from your past feelings about the deadly years and your lukewarm feelings about Dr. Pulaski, I'm guessing you won't care much for this one. For me, it's okay. I have it listed on my rankings as time filler with good moments. I agree with a lot of this comment. I think that's a good description of it. I do think we liked it a little bit more than they were expecting, because I think it's just leagues above where I would consider the deadly years. But
the next TOS video, deadly years revisited. No,
we were wrong about the deadly years. No, I'm not.
Yeah, we were wrong. It was worse than we thought.
Yeah.
This one's from Gregory. See, this is why we don't play with genetics in the Federation. You either get a con or you create a virus that ages you way too fast. Yeah, we didn't really touch on that, but yeah, I don't really like the whole genetically engineering humans and trying to like speed up the what's it called? The evolution process. It's like, oh no, you don't mess with that. So I kind of sucks for the kids, but I think they should be quarantined down there because it's like I don't like the unnatural progression of that. It's dangerous and scary.
Yeah, and I do think thematically they were really trying to dig into when you mess with human evolution, things go bad. I mean, think of like Prometheus or anything else.
Yeah.
That has that same theme, and it's a good theme. But I just like, I don't know, it didn't like interest me that much. Like the children with powers thing, I was just like, okay, that's kind of neat, but I didn't like. I was like, whatever.
Yeah, there was also no like. We had scenes of them like at the debate table or the conversation table, whatever. But like, no one brought up like the ethics and humanity of the genetic engineering at all. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's like, oh, that's happening. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if Bones had they're what? Oh, that's not.
Well, you would assume that this is something like approved by Starfleet. Like at no point did they seem like there was some rogue operation. So I think that they are probably all aware that this is like happening, would be my guess. Maybe this is the first place that had like a breakthrough. I don't know, but Dr. Pulaski does bring it up in like her ending monologue where she thinks she's about to die and does like the monologue. She brings up the human evolution point, but it was just so late in the episode to try to talk about the ethics of it that it was like just thrown on there, kind of.
Yeah, it was more just about the disease.
This one's from Elway. Wait, is the transporter like stupidly OP? It just might be. I may not like her character that much, but I do appreciate Pulaski getting a focus episode like this. Do you think the transporter's OP?
Why don't they use the transporter to fix every disease? Are they stupid?
and then they even said at the end they transported every person from that planet to get the disease out of them, like one by one. It's like, okay.
Yeah, as the show goes on, the transporter is like more and more impressive. Like you can transport people from like one location to another. It saves people like often. It saved Picard from like ultimate, nothingness in space. It stopped Lore like mid blast. Yeah. OP transport.
It is pretty OP. I wonder how many times that'll come into play. And then I also agree about the Dr. Pulaski comment. Even with, I mean, we like when there's even a Wesley episode. Like any focused episode on a side character, as long as the strength of the episode is good, that's what matters. And I'll enjoy that. So Pulaski got one here, and that even though not our favorite character, appreciate it.
Yeah, All right, this one's from Stony D. ... I only woke up during the scenes with O'Brien. Yeah. Well, I definitely perked up when he showed up on screen.
This one is from Jovette. Serious question. How much do you believe Pulaski's respect for Data has grown by the end of the episode? I don't think she cares at all. And I don't think it's even a matter of like respect necessarily, because it's like, I don't respect my computer that I edit videos on, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even see it as something that needs respect, so why would I? I think she's honestly still in that stage. There was the moments with them on the shuttlecraft, which, by the way, it was cool to see the shuttlecraft, the actual model and inside, like, looked really nice. And she's, like, apologizes to him and stuff in there. They had a nice moment, but I still don't believe she sees him how the rest of the crew sees Data, as, like, basically a person. She just sees him as a computer doing operations, or like how you would talk to a chat GPT. Like, I don't think she sees him be anything beyond that.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah. I can't remember every single line of dialogue they had, but I don't think there was anything where it was like where he called Data him or something where like was it really like I was wrong or something.
Yeah, she just like treats him like shit again and then apologizes for that most recent instance of treating him badly, but we'll see.
Yeah, it was only better in the sense that she wasn't that mean to him or that, you can't do this.
She's had other stuff going on. She
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
focus on being mean to him.
It wasn't really a development in the relationship. It was just, instead of like going like this, it was just like that.
Yeah.
Nothing, it didn't go. This one's from Smear Campaign. The starlight containing the hot guy fascinated me as a kid. Superb makeup on Pulaski, but the contrived spotlight on her medical credentials was cringeworthy. This episode was nominated for an Emmy for hair, and then in parentheses, presumably not Patrick Stewart.
This is from SNTHD. Finally, we learned something about Dr. Pulaski. She's a Picard groupie. I totally forgot about that part. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
It's revealed to Picard that Pulaski wanted to get on the Enterprise. Okay, first of all, I don't know if I'd classify it as a groupie. That's a bit harsh. But she saw the opening on the Enterprise with Dr. Crusher leaving and jumped on it because she's such a big fan of Picard. But she has done a good job not like marking out around him. She's, been very straight. So that was a nice surprise.
That was, especially in the beginning of the show. Like, I don't think anyone was marking out for Picard. Where like they're just putting him to bed, it's like, oh, Picard with a cold. So yeah, that was nice. And in terms of Picard's history with the company being Starfleet, the only other thing they've gone into is that mission 10 years ago where he like shoots that ship that wasn't responsive.
Yeah.
Right.
And kills Dr. Crusher's husband.
Yeah.
Or lets him die or whatever.
Yeah.
Carries his dead body to her doorstep. Yeah, not a ton of history that we know of, but he has some history, apparently, for her to be a fan. So, but that's just a nice little character wrinkle, and you thought that it was because you still thought she was dying, so you were like, oh man, he finds out she was a big fan right before she dies. But now that she survived and she's back, I don't know if that'll ever come back up in the future, but interesting little note.
Yeah, so not the best, not the worst, but like I said, it has some building blocks of character development that I'm sure will come handy later on when new stuff happens. Maybe some of this stuff will be floating in the back of my mind.
Yeah, this is definitely just what I would describe as just a building block episode. Like, it's just strong. This show has such a strong foundation. It's because episodes like this that do the dirty work so that you can love the really good episodes.
No one remembers the frontline soldiers that are just laying down the tracks so that the engine of season 3 to 7 can carry on, but they don't think about this stuff.
Episodes like Unnatural Selection walked so that Matter of Honor could run, and we're talking about that next.